Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to News Channel 5 Plus. You are joining us here on Open Line. I've got special guest Dan Brown joining me. He is with the Tennessee Historical Commission, just bringing a lot of insight into a subject that's really been making headlines recently, and that's the idea of relocating yet again former President James K Polk's final resting place. So the controversy, the conversation, whatever you want to call it, continues on tonight, and we're excited to have you here. And we're also excited to hear from our viewers, which honestly the phone lines have been lighting up tonight, which we're excited to see. That means that, you know, there's a lot of opinions surrounding this, and I want to go ahead and take a call from Lucy here on line 1. Hi, thanks for joining us.
Hey, y'all. Mr. Brown, I appreciate you coming on. You just have no idea. I agree with all of your points that you've made, especially pointing out that the Capitol is the pinnacle, and it's the pinnacle of security. When I first heard about this, the first thing I thought of was Grant's tomb. I'm like, have y'all ever heard what goes on at Grant's tomb? And he was supposed to be a bigger president than Polk, but Polk was our own guy. He's like Jackson. And I just, for the life of me, cannot figure out why they would want to move it. And this is what I know about Polk. I've read a few books on him, and although people don't know him nationally, he's one of our own. When he was a boy, he had an appendicitis, I think, operation or something.
It was actually a urinary stone removal.
And he was
age 17 years old.
Right, he was kind of a prisoner in a house down there at his father's house. To me, when Polk became a lawyer,
it was horrific
and here
surgery.
you have a law library, you had the Capitol Hill Library. This was his grown man hometown, and he wanted his mansion preserved. He wanted his home place reserved in perpetuity, but Greed took all this away, and we moved him to the Capitol Hill. I feel like the state failed him once in letting that happen back in the turn.
Well, it was a family issue. You know, this a lot of history there. I did a presentation in the last fall at the Southeast Society of Architectural Historians. I'm an academician. Did my graduate work, at Tulane in history and architecture, Tulane School of Architecture and the School of History down there. And I have an academic background. I've been an adjunct professor of history at MTSU, teaching part-time there. And so I did a presentation in the fall at the Southeast Society of Architectural Historians on the architectural background, history of Polk, and some of his properties and things like that. But what had happened with his house was not the state deciding to do it. It was relatives. He did not leave any direct heirs. So as such, after his wife passed away, then the heirs began to challenge his will. He had written his will in such a way that apparently was thought to violate state law about any sort of will that it leaves any kind of direction, or I guess directions or requirements in perpetuity for the property. So that the relatives challenged it, had it stripped off, then had the building sold, and then had him removed to the Capitol. So it was not the state of Tennessee that did that. That was what had happened with his family. And I guess you're right. A lot of people said, unfortunately, that house originally was Felix Grundy's house. If you want to understand Polk, a gentleman named Mr. Roderick Heller has a great book on Felix Grundy. Felix Grundy was really Polk's mentor in law. He worked for Felix Grundy as a young man coming out of college. 1818, worked with Grundy in Nashville. And so the Grundy place was the finest home in Nashville, and it was written about that way. The drawings for it and the designs for it are in the Library of Congress and things like this. So, but while Polk was president, Grundy had passed away, and then Grundy's widow had passed away, and Polk was able to obtain the Grundy place.
That's a good recommendation if folks want to kind of dive further into history.
So Grundy Place becomes Polk Place.
Yeah. So thank you to Lucy for calling in. Let's go ahead and take Kay on line 2. Can you hear me okay, Kay?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thanks for calling in.
My question is, where did the Polks want to be buried?
Great question.
Yeah, the Polks wanted to be buried at Polk Place, and this is part of, I guess, the center of the argument that we find perplexing, to say the least. the claim is that they want to bring Polk home, okay, and that the Polk home down in Columbia is and was his. They have used the term on their site at various times, ancestral home, and he lived there again. And this is what they claim at the site. This is not. There's no controversy over that. He is thought to have lived there from time to time. From 1818 to about 1820, he married Sarah Childress from Murfreesboro in 1824. She never lives there, and they build their own home down the street. But you have to realize, in this time between 1818 and 1824, he actually works for Felix Grundy in Nashville. Nashville's 50 miles away. Back then, you know, there was no public transportation. That's a 50-mile horse ride. That's a day, a solid day.
Yeah.
Okay, and so he didn't travel back and forth daily and work in Nashville. Plus, he also was elected to the Senate, and in that capacity, the state capital was in Murfreesboro then, not Nashville. So he actually served in the Senate in Murfreesboro, and when the Senate was in session, he obviously lived there. And also, there is no, if you go to the Polk home, there's no home there. I mean, there's no room there that says this was the room that Polk stayed in when he lived here from 1818, where, you know, he's thought to have lived here from 1818 to 1824, because everything that I've read historically is that he shared that with, I think, approximately 6 other siblings. So, you know, the rooms there are collections of furniture that are known to be associated with the Polks, often with the White House, and they've recreated rooms there that probably, and never existed at the Polk house. These are collections of furniture that sort of replicate, or thought to be evocative of furniture arrangements and stuff at various other places, or particularly the White House and things like that. So, well,
I know our lines are lighting up right now, so I'm going to go ahead and take Tracy. Hi, Tracy. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks for calling in.
My concern is really with Sarah right now, too, and you touched on that just a moment ago, but it is my understanding that Sarah was a prominent Nashvilleian, and that she lived for decades
from Murfreesboro
after President Polk's death, and that her church is basically right down the street from where she's buried now. She would have seen the Capitol every day. She was someone who was very prominent in Nashville and not Columbia. And so I feel like she's being, in many ways, forgotten. Everything that I've read shows that President Polk loved Sarah and would have wanted Sarah.
That's unquestionable. Yeah, there's no one that's ever questioned his love and adoration of his wife.
So yeah, Tracy, thanks for calling, and I'll kind of let you touch base on some of the comments that she was making, and we have several calls to get to after this as well.
Yes, Sarah never, there's nothing in writing, nothing we've ever read, nothing's ever been referenced to that says Sarah ever wanted to live in Columbia, much less, I say live in Columbia, never identified with that as her home. She was from Murfreesboro. They got married in Murfreesboro. They didn't get married there at Columbia. So that she never lived there in the Polk home. They had a home there in Columbia, but that their idea of where their resting places, they were following in Jackson's step. They were setting up a grand Greek revival temple in downtown Nashville, in the Grundy place, which was, you know, the mentor really for Polk, as much or more even than Jackson was, and that they set up this home down there, and they set up this grand tomb designed by Strickland, and that's where they want to be. She, you know, I guess some people have even suggested it's misogynist, that the only thing that matters is what people think President Polk wanted, and that, you know, she's being forgotten, but that her remains will be desecrated and formally moved and relocated with what is unquestionably not her. The logic here is that the Polk home down in Columbia is his home, and that he wanted to be buried in his home. And when he said he wanted to be buried in his home, he wanted to be buried in the place that he was calling his home, which was the Polk place in Nashville that was previously Grundy Place. This was his grand tomb that he had set up for and his wife lived there for, you're right, decades, until I want to say approximately 1890. She passes away, and then they're moved there too.
Definite difference there. We now have Ginger on one. Hi, Ginger.
Hi, how are y'all this evening?
Wonderful.
Good. How are you doing?
We appreciate you calling in. Thanks so much. What do you have to say for us tonight?
Well, I saw him sitting there itching his palm, so I believe he's about to come into some money.
What?
You were itching your palm, so I think you had an itchy palm. You're about to come into money.
Phrase of speech.
No, I guess it's just a nervous habit. I hope you're right, though. I mean, that would be some great news. Being a state employee, that would be very welcome news. So that would be something we'd look forward to.
Well, Ginger, thanks for calling in. Did you have a question for us tonight you'd like to ask Mr. Brown?
I'm the daughter of a local historian, the late Leland Johnson, and he wrote books like The Parks of Nashville.
Oh, wow.
Wilbur Creighton with talking about the Parthenon and local history. But now that my dad's deceased, I can't get his opinion on this.
Okay.
But I think it being a tomb, that's a like cemetery situation, and that probably should be what the family wants, the family's preference, as long as they're still living, living generations. I don't know if you've ever thought about maybe the Hermitage or Tulip Grove being moved. I would hate for that to happen, but as long as they're still living generations, that they probably should be the ones that determine that. I'm glad this is not some kind of thing where we're tearing down statues and to please people, but
well, that's in some ways related to that. I mean, you're talking about tearing down a presidential tomb and forcibly moving it, with great questions revolving around what were the intentions of the people that were interred there. I would hate to think that my relatives and my heirs 150 years after I'm gone could do with me whatever they wanted to. I would think that my wishes and my family's wishes at that time would be properly honored, and and obviously he didn't request to be buried at the Capitol grounds, but there's no question that this was an appropriate step that was undertaken by the family after he passed away, and it was clearly decided and agreed upon and paid for. The tomb was paid for at the Capitol grounds to be relocated there. The Strickland, to be relocated. The Strickland tomb was installed at Polk Place there. This was just as Jackson has done with his great tomb out by his home. He was following in the footsteps of Jackson. He was setting up the grand house, and at the same time he was doing it right near the Capitol. He was a few hundred feet from the Capitol, and this is his idea of his legacy, to be in an important place next to the Capitol, and to be moved to the Capitol grounds is obviously in death the greatest honor that can be bestowed upon particularly a politician in the state. There is no greater place to be than there. In fact, the architect Strickland of the Capitol is interred and buried inside the walls of the Capitol, and that's what he wanted. He requested. That's how much he thought of this place. That's how much he thought of that building. But that's how, and of course he designed it. But that's what he thought of that spot. And there is no more important site in the state of Tennessee. This is again the tip of the point of the spear, as far as importance. So.
Dan Brown doing a great job tonight answering all these questions here on Open Line. Again, the historic preservation specialist with the Tennessee Historical Commission. We are getting a lot of calls this evening. We have CW, Chris, and about 3 others on hold. Stay with us. We'll be right back to get to your calls. Thanks for joining us.